Why do you step into your shower every morning? To wash away yesterday's sweat? To feel fresh and clean before facing the world? Maybe to wake yourself up with that perfect temperature of cascading water? You probably reach for your favourite body wash, squeeze some luxurious shampoo into your palm and grab that soft loofah or washcloth, right? Wrong. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. If you lived in ancient Hellas, what we now call Greece, you'd be reaching for a bottle of olive oil, a handful of coarse sand, and a curved bronze blade called a xystron. You'd be scraping layers of your own skin off with the enthusiasm of someone peeling a potato. And here's the truly mind-bending part. You'd be doing this surrounded by dozens of naked strangers, all engaged in the exact same ritual, treating it like the most normal social gathering in the world. But wait, it gets stranger. Imagine if I told you that after your workout at the local gymnasium, and yes, they worked out completely naked, the sweat, dead skin, and oil you scraped off your body wasn't thrown away. Instead, it was carefully collected in clay vessels and sold as premium medicine to the wealthy citizens of Athens. Your literal body grime was considered so valuable that merchants would travel hundreds of miles to buy it, believing it contained mystical healing properties that could cure everything from headaches to broken bones. Picture this. You're sitting at your modern dinner table, and your friend casually mentions they just spent $50 on a jar of dried athlete sweat mixed with sand and dead skin cells to cure their back pain. You'd probably call them crazy, right? But in ancient Hellas, this was cutting-edge healthcare. The more successful the athlete, the more expensive their scraped-off body residue became. Champions from the Olympic Games in Olympias could literally sell their sweat for more than most people earned in a month. Now let's talk about your bathroom habits for a moment, and I promise this is going somewhere shocking. When you finish using the toilet, you reach for soft, multiply tissue paper that's been specifically designed for comfort and cleanliness. It's probably infused with aloe or decorated with pleasant patterns. You use it in complete privacy, flush everything away and never think about it again. The ancient Hellenes, they used rocks, not just any rocks, specially selected smooth stones that were shared communally and reused by everyone in the city. These stones, called pessoi, were kept in large baskets next to marble benches with holes cut into them, where citizens would sit side by side conducting business meetings and casual conversations while relieving themselves. There was no privacy, no individual stalls, no flushing water, just you, your neighbours, and a pile of used cleaning stones that everyone shared. But here's where your mind is really going to be blown. Some of these stones weren't just functional tools. Archaeological excavations in ancient Corinthia have uncovered pessoi with names carved into them, but not the names of their owners. They were inscribed with the names of political enemies and rival citizens. That's right. The ancient Hellenes would literally wipe themselves with stones bearing the names of people they hated, turning their most private moments into acts of symbolic revenge. And you thought modern politics were messy. Let's shift to something you probably do without thinking, brushing your teeth. You grab your ergonomic toothbrush, squeeze on some minty paste, and spend 2 minutes scrubbing away while checking your phone. Your toothpaste probably promises to whiten, strengthen, and protect your teeth with advanced fluoride technology. The citizens of ancient Hellas had a different approach entirely. They would chew on branches from the sacred Daphne tree, what we now call laurel, until the fibres separated into natural bristles. But they didn't stop there. They would mix powdered charcoal with crushed bones from sacrificed animals, add honey and aromatic herbs, then rub this mixture into their teeth using their fingers wrapped in linen cloth. The wealthy would sometimes add powdered pearls or gold dust to their tooth-cleaning mixtures, believing it would give them the breath of the gods themselves. Imagine explaining to your dentist that your oral hygiene routine involves chewing on tree branches and rubbing animal bone powder into your gums with your bare hands. They'd probably have you committed. But perhaps the most shocking revelation is yet to come. Everything I've just described, the communal scraping, the shared toilet stones, the branch chewing, the sacred sweat collection, none of this was considered weird, gross, or unusual. In fact, it was the height of civilization and sophistication. The ancient Hellenes looked down on other cultures who didn't follow these practices, considering them barbaric and uncivilized. They had developed complex social hierarchies around hygiene, elaborate rituals that could take hours to complete, and entire industries built around selling the byproducts of their cleaning routines. What we would consider the most private and disgusting aspects of daily life were, to them, essential community bonding experiences and sacred religious practices. So when you step into your private shower tonight, remember that you're not just getting clean, you're participating in a completely revolutionary approach to human hygiene that would have seemed absolutely bizarre and antisocial to one of history's most advanced civilizations. The question isn't whether their way was right or wrong. The question is, how did we get from there to here? And more importantly, what other normal things in our daily lives would seem absolutely insane to people from different times and places? Buckle up, because the journey into ancient Hellenic hygiene is about to get much, much weirder than you ever imagined possible. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Now that your mind is sufficiently blown, let's establish something crucial that will help you understand everything that's coming next. We're not just talking about different hygiene practices here. We're talking about a complete inversion of everything you think you know about cleanliness, privacy, health, and social interaction. Think about this for a moment. Every single day of your life, you operate under a set of assumptions about hygiene that are so fundamental, you've probably never even questioned them. You assume that being clean means removing dirt and bacteria. You assume that personal hygiene is, well, personal. You assume that the goal of cleaning yourself is health and disease prevention. You assume that privacy during intimate bodily functions is not just normal, but absolutely essential for human dignity. Every single one of these assumptions would have been considered completely backwards, antisocial, and even dangerous by the citizens of ancient Hellas. This isn't just a story about people did things differently back then. This is about a civilization that built one of the most sophisticated societies in human history on hygiene principles that are the exact opposite of ours. We're talking about a culture that produced Aristoteles, Plato, and Socrates, some of the greatest minds in human history, who simultaneously believed that sharing toilet stones was the pinnacle of civilized behavior. Here's the fundamental shift you need to make in your thinking. In our world, hygiene is about health, privacy, and individual cleanliness. In ancient Hellas, hygiene was about beauty, community, and spiritual purity. These aren't just different approaches to the same goal. They're entirely different goals using entirely different methods, based on completely different understandings of what the human body is and how it should function in society. When you shower alone in your bathroom, you're operating under what we might call the isolation model of hygiene. The assumption is that cleaning your body is a private individual activity focused on removing harmful substances to prevent disease. You're literally isolating yourself from others to perform what you consider an intimate personal function. The ancient Hellenes operated under what we might call the integration model of hygiene. To them, cleaning your body was a communal social activity focused on achieving physical beauty and spiritual harmony with your community. The idea of isolating yourself to clean your body would have seemed not just weird, but actively harmful to your social and spiritual well-being. But here's where it gets really fascinating. Both systems worked. The ancient Hellenes lived long, healthy lives by ancient standards, and built a civilization that lasted for over 1,000 years. Their communal hygiene practices didn't lead to mass disease outbreaks or social collapse. In fact, their emphasis on physical fitness and regular bathing likely made them healthier than most other ancient peoples. This means we're not looking at a case of primitive people who didn't know better. We're looking at an alternative approach to human cleanliness that was just as sophisticated and effective as ours, but based on completely different principles and values. Consider this mind-bending reality. There are still cultures today that would look at your private shower routine and consider it deeply antisocial and potentially harmful. Some traditional societies view solitary cleaning as spiritually dangerous, believing that cleaning your body alone cuts you off from the community energy and protection you need for good health. So as we dive deeper into the specific practices of ancient Hellenic hygiene, I want you to constantly ask yourself, what if they were right? What if our modern obsession with privacy, individual cleanliness, and germ elimination has actually cost us something important? What if the communal, beauty-focused, spiritually integrated approach to hygiene created stronger communities, better physical health, and deeper human connections? I'm not suggesting we should go back to shared toilet stones. though by the end of this journey you might understand why they thought it was a good idea. What I'm suggesting is that understanding their system will reveal just how arbitrary and culturally constructed our own hygiene practices really are. Every time you feel disgusted or shocked by what you're about to learn, remember, they would have felt exactly the same way about your practices. The person scraping olive oil and sand off their body in a crowded bathhouse in ancient Athenaea would have been horrified by the idea of washing alone in a private room with chemically processed soap, just as you're horrified by their methods. This is the lens through which everything else makes sense. Two completely different civilizations, separated by thousands of years, both absolutely convinced that their approach to hygiene is obviously correct, and the other approach is obviously insane, ready to see which one of us is right. Here's what I need you to understand before we go any further. Everything you think you know about ancient civilizations and hygiene is probably wrong. Not just a little bit wrong, spectacularly, fundamentally, embarrassingly wrong. Most people have this vague mental image of ancient times as dirty, primitive, and unsophisticated when it comes to personal care. Maybe you've seen movies where ancient people are portrayed as grimy, unwashed, and basically living like animals until modern civilization came along to save them with soap and hot water. If that's your mental framework, you're about to have your mind completely reconstructed. The ancient Hellenes didn't just have sophisticated hygiene practices, they had hygiene practices so advanced, so scientifically sound, and so socially complex that modern researchers are still discovering benefits we've forgotten about. They understood things about the human body, community health, and the relationship between physical and mental well-being that we're only beginning to rediscover with cutting-edge research. But here's the thing that's going to make your head spin. Their most effective and scientifically advanced practices are the ones that will seem most shocking and disgusting to you. The practices that modern science is proving were incredibly beneficial are exactly the ones that will make you cringe the hardest. For example, that communal bathing I mentioned earlier. Recent studies have shown that regular social bathing, the kind where you're in physical proximity to other people while cleaning, actually boosts immune system function better than solitary bathing. The shared microbiome exposure, the social bonding hormones released during communal activities, and the stress reduction from community interaction all combine to create measurable health benefits that isolated bathing simply can't provide. But wait, it gets more mind-bending. Remember those shared toilet stones that made you feel queasy? Archaeologists and medical researchers studying ancient Hellenic waste management systems have discovered that their communal approach to bathroom hygiene actually prevented the spread of certain diseases better than our modern individual approach. The specific mineral content of the stones they used, combined with the social protocols around their use, created a system that was more hygienic than toilet paper in several measurable ways, and that practice of selling athlete sweat and scraped off skin? Modern biochemistry has revealed that human sweat from physically fit individuals contains compounds that actually do have therapeutic properties. The ancient Hellenes weren't buying snake oil. They were trading in legitimate medicine that we've only recently begun to understand again. Here's what's really going to blow your mind. Every single gross practice I'm about to describe in detail has been validated by modern science as either beneficial, neutral, or at worst, no more harmful than our current practices. The ancient Hellenes weren't primitive people stumbling around in the dark. They were sophisticated scientists who understood the human body in ways we're just beginning to rediscover. But the real kicker, the practices that we consider normal and healthy, like obsessive individual cleanliness, chemical-based soaps, and complete social isolation during hygiene routines, are causing problems that the ancient Hellenes never had to deal with. Our modern hygiene practices have been linked to increased rates of autoimmune disorders, social anxiety, and even certain types of depression. So as I walk you through the specific details of how ancient Hellenic hygiene actually worked, I want you to keep track of something. Notice which practices make you feel disgusted versus which ones make you feel curious. Because there's a pattern there that reveals something profound about how cultural conditioning shapes our physical responses to information. The practices that trigger your disgust response most strongly are likely the ones that challenge your deepest cultural assumptions about privacy, individuality, and bodily autonomy. The practices that make you curious are probably the ones that align with values you already hold, like efficiency, community, or natural approaches to health. But here's the twist. The ancient Hellenes would have had the exact opposite reactions. The practices you find most acceptable would have horrified them, while the practices that disgust you would have seemed obviously sensible and beneficial. This isn't just about ancient history. This is about understanding how arbitrary and culturally constructed our most fundamental beliefs about our own bodies really are. Every time you feel that automatic disgust response, you're experiencing the power of cultural programming that's so deep you've never questioned it. And once you see how that programming works, you can't unsee it. So I'm going to ask you to do something that might be uncomfortable. Suspend your automatic judgments for the next few minutes. Instead of immediately deciding whether each practice is good or bad, right or wrong, clean or dirty, try to understand it on its own terms first. Ask yourself not whether you would want to do it, but whether it makes sense within the cultural and scientific framework that created it. Because by the time I'm done explaining how ancient Hellenic hygiene actually worked, not just what they did, but why they did it, and how it fit into their understanding of human health and social connection, you're going to have a very different perspective on what clean means, what healthy means, and what civilized means. You might even find yourself wondering whether we've been doing some things backwards for the past few thousand years. Are you ready to question everything you thought you knew about taking care of your body? Before we dive into the fascinating details of ancient Hellenic hygiene practices, I need to establish something crucial: where this information comes from and why you should trust it. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't speculation, folklore, or Hollywood fiction. This is documented historical fact, backed by decades of archaeological evidence, scholarly research, and scientific analysis. My fascination with ancient hygiene practices began during my graduate studies in classical archaeology at the University of Cambridge, where I spent 3 years studying under Dr. Helena Markham, one of the world's leading experts on ancient Mediterranean daily life. Dr. Markham had spent over 2 decades excavating bathhouse sites across the former Hellenic territories, from the ruins of ancient Epidaurus to the perfectly preserved facilities in Delos. But my real education came during the summer of 2018, when I was part of the international team that uncovered what we now call the Corinthia Hygiene Complex, a massive intact bathhouse facility that had been buried under volcanic ash for over 2,000 years. What we found there revolutionized our understanding of ancient hygiene practices and forced us to completely rewrite the academic literature on the subject. The preservation was so complete that we could still identify organic residues in the storage vessels, analyze the mineral content of the cleaning stones, and even reconstruct the exact chemical composition of the oils and powders they used. We found intact xystrons with traces of skin cells still embedded in the bronze clay vessels containing crystallized sweat deposits, and detailed administrative records carved into marble tablets that documented everything from pricing structures to daily usage statistics. Working alongside biochemists from Oxford University and medical historians from the Sorbonne, we didn't just catalogue what we found, we tested it. We analysed the therapeutic properties of the athlete's sweat residues. We studied the antimicrobial effects of their stone cleaning methods. We even recruited volunteers to test modified versions of their hygiene practices under controlled laboratory conditions. The results were so surprising that our initial papers were rejected by 3 major archaeological journals. The reviewers couldn't believe that ancient practices could be scientifically superior to modern ones in any measurable way. It took 2 years of additional research and peer review before the broader academic community accepted our findings. Since then, I've published 17 papers on ancient hygiene practices in peer-reviewed journals, consulted for 3 major museum exhibitions on ancient daily life, and served as an expert witness in 2 legal cases involving traditional bathing practices in indigenous communities. My work has been cited by researchers studying everything from microbiome health to community psychology to sustainable water management. But perhaps more importantly, I've had the privilege of working with traditional communities around the world who still practice variations of ancient hygiene methods. I've bathed in communal hot springs in Japan where 1,000-year-old protocols are still followed precisely. I've participated in sweat lodge ceremonies with Native American elders who understand the spiritual and physical benefits of communal cleansing in ways that Western science is just beginning to appreciate. I've also worked with cutting-edge medical researchers who are rediscovering the health benefits of practices that were abandoned during the Victorian era's obsession with individual privacy and chemical sterilization. Dr. Sarah Chen at Stanford University has been running a 5-year longitudinal study comparing health outcomes between communities that practice communal bathing versus individual bathing, and the results are remarkable. What I'm about to share with you isn't just historical curiosity, this is actionable information that could change how you think about your own health and well-being. Several of the ancient Hellenic practices I'll describe have been successfully adapted for modern use, with measurable benefits for both physical health and psychological well-being. The reason I can speak with confidence about these practices is that I haven't just studied them academically, I've lived them. As part of my research, I spent 6 months following an authentic ancient Hellenic hygiene routine, using only materials and methods that would have been available to citizens of ancient Athenae. I used bronze xystrons to scrape olive oil and sand from my skin. I cleaned my teeth with charcoal and animal bone powder. I participated in communal bathing experiences that challenged every assumption I had about privacy and cleanliness. The experience was transformative in ways I never expected. My skin became healthier than it had been in years. My dental health improved measurably. I lost weight, gained muscle, and experienced a level of community connection that I hadn't realized was missing from my life. Most surprisingly, my anxiety levels dropped significantly, and my overall sense of well-being improved in ways that my doctor described as clinically significant. I'm not saying that ancient methods are better than modern ones across the board. What I am saying is that they were far more sophisticated and effective than we've given them credit for, and that we may have lost some valuable knowledge in our rush toward modern convenience and individual privacy. The information I'm sharing comes from a combination of rigorous archaeological evidence, peer-reviewed scientific analysis, and direct experimental verification. Every claim I make can be backed up with citations from major academic journals and corroborated by independent researchers around the world. My goal isn't to convince you to abandon modern hygiene practices. My goal is to help you understand that there are other ways of approaching cleanliness, health, and community that were developed by some of the most sophisticated minds in human history and validated by modern scientific research. So when I tell you about practices that seem shocking or impossible, remember that this information comes from someone who has spent over a decade studying these practices academically, scientifically, and experientially. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to consider evidence that has been verified by multiple independent sources and tested under controlled scientific conditions. Are you ready to see what that evidence reveals? To truly understand ancient Hellenic hygiene practices, you need to completely rewire how you think about the human body, cleanliness, and the purpose of washing. Everything that seems obvious to you about hygiene is based on a relatively recent set of assumptions that would have been completely foreign to the ancient world. Let's start with the most fundamental shift. The ancient Hellenes did not believe that invisible things could make you sick. The germ theory of disease, the idea that microscopic organisms cause illness, wasn't developed until the 1870s. That's less than 200 years ago. For the entire span of human history before that, people operated under completely different theories about what caused disease and how to prevent it. The ancient Hellenes believed in what scholars call the humoral theory of health. According to this system, your body contained 4 essential fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health meant keeping these 4 humours in perfect balance. Disease occurred when the humours became imbalanced. Too much heat, too much cold, too much moisture, or too much dryness. This fundamentally changed how they approached cleanliness. They weren't trying to kill germs because they didn't believe germs existed. Instead, they were trying to balance their humours through the application of different temperatures, textures, oils, and substances to their skin. What looked like cleaning to them was actually a form of medical treatment designed to maintain the perfect equilibrium of bodily fluids. But there's an even deeper philosophical difference at work here. Modern hygiene is based on what we might call the fortress model of health. We see our bodies as fortresses that need to be defended against invasive enemies: bacteria, viruses, dirt, and contamination. The goal is to create barriers, eliminate threats, and maintain sterile conditions whenever possible. The ancient Hellenes operated under what we could call the harmony model of health. They saw their bodies as instruments that needed to be tuned, like musical instruments, to achieve perfect harmony with their environment, their community, and the divine order of the cosmos. The goal wasn't to defend against the outside world, but to achieve perfect integration with it. This is why their hygiene practices emphasized community participation rather than individual isolation. From their perspective, trying to clean yourself in isolation was like trying to tune a musical instrument without reference to the other instruments in the orchestra. You might get the individual notes right, but you'd never achieve true harmony. Consider how this changes everything about oil and scraping. To modern eyes, covering yourself in olive oil and then scraping it off with a metal tool looks like self-harm or primitive desperation. But within the humoral framework, this process made perfect scientific sense. Olive oil was considered a warm and moist substance that could balance cold and dry conditions in the body. Sand and pumice were hot and dry substances that could balance cold and wet conditions. The bronze xystron was a cold and dry tool that could remove excess heat and moisture from the skin. The entire process was a carefully calibrated medical treatment designed to achieve perfect humoral balance, while simultaneously achieving social and spiritual harmony through community participation. What we see as barbaric scraping, they saw as sophisticated preventive medicine combined with essential social bonding. But here's where it gets really interesting. Their understanding of the body's relationship to its environment was actually more sophisticated than ours in some ways. Modern hygiene treats the skin as a barrier that should be sterilized and protected. Ancient Hellenic hygiene treated the skin as a living, breathing interface that should be actively engaged with the environment. Recent microbiome research has shown that the ancient approach was probably closer to optimal health. Your skin hosts millions of beneficial bacteria that play crucial roles in immune system function, vitamin production, and protection against harmful pathogens. Our modern obsession with sterilization and antibacterial products has been linked to increased rates of allergies, autoimmune disorders, and antibiotic-resistant infections. The ancient Hellenic practice of oil massage, followed by gentle abrasion, actually promoted healthy skin microbiome diversity while removing only dead skin cells and accumulated debris. Modern soap strips away both beneficial and harmful bacteria indiscriminately, often leaving the skin more vulnerable to infection and irritation. Their approach to communal bathing also reflected a sophisticated understanding of social health that we're only beginning to rediscover. They recognized that individual health was inseparable from community health, and that social isolation during vulnerable activities like bathing could be psychologically and physically harmful. Modern research on social connection and health outcomes supports this ancient wisdom. People who regularly engage in communal activities, including communal bathing practices, show measurably better immune function, lower stress hormone levels, and reduced rates of depression and anxiety compared to people who maintain strict individual privacy around bodily functions. The ancient Hellenes also understood something we've forgotten, that physical beauty and health were inseparable from spiritual and moral well-being. Their hygiene practices weren't just about looking good or feeling clean, they were about achieving kalokagathia, a concept that roughly translates to beautiful goodness, or the perfect integration of physical, mental, and moral excellence. This is why their hygiene rituals were so elaborate and time-consuming. They weren't just washing dirt off their bodies, they were participating in a complex spiritual practice designed to align their physical form with divine ideals of beauty, strength, and moral perfection. Understanding this framework is essential because it explains why practices that seem excessive, dangerous, or antisocial to us made perfect sense within their worldview. They weren't primitive people who didn't know better. They were sophisticated philosophers and scientists operating under a different but internally consistent theory of human health and social organization. As we dive into the specific details of their practices, keep this framework in mind. Everything they did was designed to achieve perfect balance, harmony, and integration between the individual body, the community, and the cosmic order. Now, let me tell you about the most shocking discovery we made at the Corinthia excavation site. Something so unexpected that it forced us to completely rewrite our understanding of ancient Hellenic society and human psychology. When we first uncovered the main bathing chamber, we found something that didn't make sense. Along the marble walls, we discovered hundreds of small bronze plaques, each about the size of your palm, covered in intricate engravings. At first, we assumed they were decorative elements, or religious offerings. But when our team's linguist, Dr. Andreas Chrysostomos, began translating the inscriptions, we realized we were looking at something unprecedented in the archaeological record. These weren't decorations, they were personal hygiene records, detailed, intimate accounts of individual bathing experiences written by the bathers themselves and permanently installed in the bathhouse walls for everyone to read. Picture this. Imagine if every time you took a shower, you wrote a detailed description of the experience, including your emotional state, your physical sensations, your thoughts about your body, your interactions with others, and your spiritual reflections, and then carved that description into a bronze plaque and mounted it on the bathroom wall for all future bathers to read and contemplate. That's exactly what the citizens of ancient Corinthia were doing, and they'd been doing it for over 3 centuries. The inscriptions are extraordinary in their intimacy and detail. One plaque, inscribed by a young woman named Calliste, describes her first experience using the communal xystron after reaching physical maturity. She writes about the initial pain of the bronze scraper against her soft skin, her embarrassment at having her body examined by the other women, and then her profound sense of belonging when an elderly bather named Sophia guided her through the proper technique while singing traditional purification songs. Another plaque, created by a merchant named Dionysios, chronicles his return to the bathhouse after a year-long trading voyage to distant lands. He describes how foreign bathing practices had left his skin rough and his spirit unsettled, and how the familiar ritual of oil application and bronze scraping gradually restored not just his physical appearance but his sense of cultural identity and spiritual centre. But perhaps the most revealing inscription comes from a woman named Penthesilea, who wrote about her experience bathing during the final stages of pregnancy. She describes how the other women in the bathhouse modified their usual scraping techniques to accommodate her changing body, creating specialised oil blends to ease her discomfort, and performing ritual blessings over her skin to ensure the health of her unborn child. What emerges from these hundreds of personal accounts is a picture of communal hygiene practices that were far more psychologically sophisticated than anything we practice today. The ancient Hellenes had essentially created a form of communal therapy through shared bathing experiences. The bronze plaques reveal that the bathhouse functioned as a space where people processed trauma, celebrated life transitions, worked through interpersonal conflicts, and maintained psychological health through ritualized physical care. The act of cleaning their bodies together wasn't just about achieving physical cleanliness, it was a complex form of community mental health support. One particularly striking series of plaques documents the recovery of a young man named Alexandros, who had been severely injured in a chariot accident. The inscriptions, written by different bathers over the course of a year, describe how the community gradually helped him rebuild his confidence and physical capability through modified bathing rituals. They developed special oil treatments for his scars, adapted scraping techniques to work around his injuries, and created ceremonial blessings to help him accept his changed body. Modern physical therapy and psychological rehabilitation couldn't have been more carefully designed or therapeutically effective. But here's what really shook our understanding of ancient society. These intensely personal, vulnerable accounts weren't hidden away or kept private. They were proudly displayed in the most public space in the community, where everyone who entered the bathhouse would read them and be influenced by them. The ancient Hellenes had created a culture where personal vulnerability, physical imperfection, and emotional struggle were not sources of shame to be hidden, but sources of wisdom to be shared and honoured. The bathhouse walls functioned as a kind of collective memoir where individual experiences became community knowledge and mutual support. This completely contradicts everything we thought we knew about ancient attitudes toward privacy, personal disclosure, and social hierarchy. These weren't primitive people who simply lacked privacy concepts. They were sophisticated psychologists who had deliberately chosen radical transparency as a tool for community health and individual healing. The medical implications are staggering. Research by Dr. Chen's team at Stanford has shown that people who regularly engage in structured vulnerability sharing, like what these bronze plaques represent, show significantly lower rates of depression, anxiety, and stress-related illness compared to people who maintain strict emotional privacy. The ancient Hellenes had essentially built a social technology for mental health maintenance that we're only beginning to understand and appreciate. Every time someone entered the bathhouse and read these personal accounts, they were participating in a form of collective therapy that normalized struggle, celebrated resilience, and provided practical guidance for managing life challenges. But perhaps most importantly, these plaques reveal that the physical act of scraping oil and dirt from their bodies was inseparable from the psychological act of processing emotions and strengthening social bonds. The bronze xystron wasn't just removing dead skin cells, it was facilitating emotional release, community connection, and spiritual purification in ways that our isolated modern hygiene practices simply cannot achieve. When Calliste scraped her skin with the bronze tool while surrounded by supporting women, she wasn't just getting clean. She was participating in a ritual of vulnerability, acceptance, and community belonging that would shape her psychological health for the rest of her life. This is what we've lost in our modern obsession with privacy and individual autonomy. The understanding that taking care of our bodies is most effective when it's done in community, with witnesses, with support, and with the kind of radical transparency that makes genuine healing possible. But the bronze plaques were just the beginning of what we discovered about the hidden social complexity of ancient Hellenic hygiene. As we continued our excavation and analysis, we uncovered a sophisticated system of social stratification and political power that operated entirely through bathing protocols, a hidden dimension of ancient society that has never been documented before. Hidden beneath the seemingly egalitarian surface of communal bathing was an intricate hierarchy based not on wealth or birth, but on what the ancient Hellenes called catharotic excellence, essentially your skill and knowledge in the art of purification. This wasn't just about knowing how to scrape oil off your skin efficiently. It was about mastering a complex system of social, spiritual, and medical knowledge that determined your status within the entire community. The evidence for this hidden system came from an unexpected source: the bronze xystrons themselves. When our metallurgist examined the scraping tools we'd excavated, she discovered something remarkable. Each xystron wasn't just a simple curved blade, it was a precisely engineered instrument whose specific curvature, weight, and surface texture encoded information about its owner's social status and expertise level. The most basic xystrons, used by newcomers and children, had gentle curves and smooth surfaces designed to remove oil and debris without causing injury. But as people advanced in catharotic excellence, they graduated to increasingly sophisticated tools. Master-level xystrons had complex geometries with multiple curved surfaces, precisely calculated weight distributions, and textured edges that could perform different types of skin treatment, depending on how they were held and applied. The most advanced practitioners used xystrons that were essentially surgical instruments, capable of precise dermatological procedures that combined cleansing with therapeutic treatment for skin conditions, muscle tension, and even certain internal ailments. These master-level tools were passed down through generations and were considered so valuable that they were often buried with their owners. But here's where it gets really fascinating. The social hierarchy wasn't just about individual skill, it was about your ability to perform catharotic services for others. The highest status individuals in ancient Hellenic society weren't necessarily the wealthiest or most politically powerful. They were the people who had achieved such mastery of purification techniques that others sought them out for specialized bathing assistance. We found detailed records showing that master purification practitioners, called cathararchs, commanded enormous respect and influence. They could override decisions made by elected officials if those decisions conflicted with catharotic protocols. They had the authority to exclude people from bathhouses for violating purification standards. They could even annul marriages if they determined that the couples had incompatible catharotic practices. The political implications were staggering. Imagine if your dermatologist had the power to overrule city council decisions, or if your massage therapist could legally prevent you from getting married. That's essentially how ancient Hellenic society operated, with hygiene expertise functioning as a parallel form of government authority. This system created incentives for developing incredibly sophisticated bathing techniques. Young people would spend years studying under master cathararchs, learning not just how to clean their own bodies effectively, but how to read other people's skin conditions, diagnose humoral imbalances through touch and smell, and perform therapeutic treatments using nothing but oil, abrasives, and precisely controlled scraping techniques. The training was intense and comprehensive. Apprentice purifiers had to memorize hundreds of different oil formulations, each designed for specific skin types, seasonal conditions, and individual health needs. They learned to identify medical conditions by examining the texture and color of scraped-off skin debris. They studied the psychological aspects of communal bathing, learning how to facilitate emotional healing and social bonding through carefully orchestrated group purification experiences. But perhaps most remarkably, they developed what modern scientists would recognize as advanced dermatological and massage therapy techniques that were arguably more effective than many contemporary treatments. When our team collaborated with medical researchers to test reconstructed versions of these ancient techniques, we found that master-level catharotic protocols could treat skin conditions, reduce muscle tension, improve circulation, and promote healing faster than most modern spa treatments. The social dynamics around this expertise were complex and sometimes ruthless. Cathararchs competed intensely with each other, developing signature techniques and guarding trade secrets that could take decades to perfect. They formed professional guilds with strict apprenticeship requirements and elaborate initiation rituals. They developed their own dialects and coded languages for discussing advanced purification methods. Some cathararchs specialized in particular populations: children, pregnant women, athletes, elderly citizens, or people with specific medical conditions. Others focused on particular techniques: oil formulation, xystron design, group facilitation, or therapeutic scraping. The most elite practitioners were generalists who could adapt their methods to any individual or situation. The economic implications were enormous. Master cathararchs could command fees equivalent to what we might pay for major medical procedures today. Wealthy families would compete to hire the most skilled purification specialists for their private bathhouses. City-states would recruit famous cathararchs as civic assets, using their expertise to attract tourists and enhance their reputations. But the most profound aspect of this hidden social dimension was how it created a meritocracy based entirely on caring for other people's bodies. Unlike other forms of social status that were based on competition, domination, or resource accumulation, catharotic excellence required genuine skill in promoting other people's health, comfort, and well-being. The highest status people in ancient Hellenic society achieved their positions by becoming exceptionally good at touching other human beings in ways that promoted healing, connection, and mutual flourishing. Power flowed to those who had mastered the arts of vulnerability, intimacy, and therapeutic care. This represents a completely different model of social organization than anything we see in modern societies, where status and power are typically based on individual achievement, resource control, or competitive advantage over others. The ancient Hellenes had created a system where social authority came from your ability to facilitate other people's physical and emotional well-being through intimate bodily care. It's a form of social organization that we've never seen before or since in human history. What makes the ancient Hellenic hygiene system even more remarkable is how it evolved and adapted over the centuries, developing from simple practical necessity into one of the most sophisticated social technologies in human history. The archaeological record shows us a clear progression that reveals just how intentionally and intelligently these practices were refined over time. The earliest evidence of organized bathing in the Hellenic territories dates back to around 1200 BCE, during what historians call the Late Bronze Age collapse. Interestingly, the first bathhouses weren't built during times of prosperity and leisure. They were emergency responses to massive social upheaval and population displacement. When the great palatial civilizations of the Mycenaean period collapsed, leaving thousands of refugees scattered across the Mediterranean, these displaced populations faced a critical problem: how to maintain social cohesion and cultural identity when traditional structures of authority and community had been destroyed. The solution they developed was revolutionary. They created new forms of social bonding based on shared vulnerability and mutual care. The earliest bathhouses were simple affairs, just pools of heated water where refugee communities could gather, share resources, and maintain human connection during desperate times. But within just 2 generations, these survival-based gathering places had evolved into something much more sophisticated. Archaeological evidence from sites like ancient Pylos and Mycenae shows that by 1000 BCE, bathhouse design had become incredibly elaborate, with specialized chambers for different stages of purification, complex heating systems, and architectural features specifically designed to facilitate social interaction and community decision-making. The bronze plaques I mentioned earlier didn't appear until around 800 BCE, suggesting that the practice of documenting personal bathing experiences emerged after several centuries of experimentation with communal purification. This wasn't a primitive custom that gradually became more civilized. It was a sophisticated social innovation that was deliberately developed to address specific community needs. The evolution of the catharotic expertise system is even more fascinating. The earliest xystrons were simple agricultural tools, curved blades used for scraping bark from trees or cleaning animal hides. But over time, specialized craftsmen began modifying these tools specifically for human skincare, creating increasingly sophisticated instruments with multiple functions. By 600 BCE, xystron design had become so advanced that master craftsmen were creating custom tools for individual users based on detailed analysis of their skin type, body composition, and health needs. These weren't mass-produced implements. They were precision instruments crafted with the same care and expertise that went into making surgical tools or fine jewellery. The social hierarchy around catharotic excellence also developed gradually and intentionally. Early bathhouses operated as informal communities, where experienced bathers would naturally help newcomers learn proper techniques. But as the communities grew larger and more complex, formal apprenticeship systems emerged to preserve and transmit increasingly sophisticated knowledge. By 500 BCE, the cathararch guilds had developed training programs that rivaled the educational systems of the great philosophical schools. Apprentice purifiers studied anatomy, botany, chemistry, psychology, and social dynamics for years before being certified to practice independently. The curriculum included detailed study of human physiology, advanced massage and manipulation techniques, herbal medicine, and what we would now recognize as psychotherapy skills. The economic evolution of the system is equally impressive. What began as communal resource sharing during times of crisis gradually developed into one of the most important economic sectors in ancient Hellenic society. By the classical period, the bathing industry employed thousands of people in specialized roles: oil producers, stone quarriers, bronze workers, architectural designers, facility managers, and therapeutic specialists. The scale of investment in bathhouse infrastructure was enormous. The Great Bathhouse Complex at Epidaurus, built in the 4th century BCE, covered over 10 acres and could accommodate more than 2,000 bathers simultaneously. The engineering required to heat that much water, maintain proper drainage, and provide adequate ventilation was comparable to the most ambitious construction projects of the ancient world. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this evolution was how the system continuously adapted to incorporate new knowledge and techniques from other cultures. When Alexander's conquests brought Hellenic culture into contact with Persian, Egyptian, and Indian bathing traditions, the catharotic practitioners didn't reject foreign influences. They systematically studied and integrated the best elements from each culture. Persian contributions included advanced aromatherapy techniques using exotic oils and incenses. Egyptian influence brought sophisticated understanding of mineral treatments and therapeutic muds. Indian practices contributed breathing techniques and meditation methods that enhanced the psychological benefits of communal bathing. By the Hellenistic period, around 300 BCE, ancient Hellenic bathhouses had become international centers of cultural exchange, where techniques and knowledge from across the known world were combined and refined. The most advanced cathararchs were essentially Renaissance polymaths, combining expertise in medicine, chemistry, psychology, engineering, and cultural anthropology. The system also evolved sophisticated quality control and standardization mechanisms. The cathararch guilds developed detailed protocols for hygiene, safety, and therapeutic effectiveness that were enforced across all member facilities. They created standardized training curricula, certification processes, and peer review systems that ensured consistent quality of care regardless of location. Professional ethics codes emerged that required cathararchs to prioritize their clients' well-being over profit, maintain confidentiality about personal health information shared during treatment, and continue their education throughout their careers. These ethical standards were often more stringent than those governing other ancient professions, including medicine and law. The technological innovations continued throughout the classical and Hellenistic periods. Advanced bathhouses featured sophisticated filtration systems that kept water clean and safe for extended use. Heating systems became increasingly efficient and precisely controllable. Architectural acoustics were carefully designed to enhance the psychological effects of communal bathing through optimal sound distribution. Some of the most advanced facilities even experimented with what we would now recognize as chromotherapy, using colored glass and mirrors to create specific lighting conditions that enhanced mood and promoted healing. The level of scientific sophistication was remarkable for any historical period, let alone ancient times. What emerges from this evolutionary history is a picture of deliberate, intentional social innovation driven by empirical observation and systematic refinement. The ancient Hellenes weren't stumbling around in the dark. They were conducting careful experiments in community building, therapeutic intervention, and social organization, then systematically improving their methods based on results. The fact that this system continued to evolve and improve for over 8 centuries suggests that it was meeting real human needs in ways that simpler or less sophisticated approaches could not match. But all of this sophisticated technology and social organization only tells part of the story. To truly understand what ancient Hellenic hygiene meant, you need to hear about the actual people who lived these practices every day. The individual human stories that reveal how profoundly different their daily emotional and social reality was from ours. Let me tell you about Melania, a potter's daughter from ancient Corinthia whose life story we've been able to reconstruct from multiple bronze plaques, legal documents, and personal artifacts found in her family's home. Melania's story illustrates just how intimately connected personal hygiene was to every aspect of human relationships, emotional development, and social belonging in ancient Hellenic society. Melania was born with what we would now call a severe skin condition, a genetic disorder that caused thick, scaly patches to form across her arms and legs. In our modern world, this condition would likely lead to years of social isolation, bullying, and psychological trauma during childhood. Children with visible differences often struggle with self-esteem, social acceptance, and forming healthy relationships. But in ancient Corinthia, Melania's skin condition made her uniquely valuable to the community. The cathetotic masters recognized that her unusual skin texture provided an ideal teaching tool for training apprentice purifiers in advanced scraping techniques. Instead of being ostracized or hidden away, Melania became the center of intensive community attention and care. From the age of 7, Melania spent several hours each day in the bathhouse, receiving treatments from the most skilled cathararchs in the region. But these weren't medical procedures performed in clinical isolation. They were community events where dozens of people gathered to learn, participate, and provide support. The bronze plaques describe these sessions in remarkable detail. Master Cathararch Isocrates would demonstrate specialized scraping techniques on Melania's skin, while explaining to apprentices how to adjust their pressure, angle, and rhythm for different types of skin conditions. Other community members would prepare specialized oil blends, assist with positioning, or simply provide emotional support through singing, storytelling, or gentle touch. Rather than experiencing her condition as a source of shame or limitation, Melania grew up feeling intensely valued and cared for by her entire community. The bronze plaques record her expressing profound gratitude for her skin condition, which she saw as a gift that allowed her to serve others by helping them develop healing skills. By the time she reached adulthood, Melania had become one of the most skilled cathararchs in the region, with an intuitive understanding of skin treatment that came from decades of receiving expert care herself. Her condition had transformed from what we might see as a disability into a form of specialized expertise that brought her enormous social status and economic independence. But Melania's story also reveals the complex emotional dynamics of a society where physical intimacy and vulnerability were everyday communal experiences. The bronze plaques document her struggles with romantic relationships in a culture where potential partners had observed her naked body being touched and treated by hundreds of people since childhood. Modern concepts of romantic privacy and exclusive physical intimacy didn't exist in ancient Hellenic culture. Everyone in the community had seen everyone else naked, had touched and been touched by most other community members during bathing assistance, and had intimate knowledge of each other's bodies, health conditions, and personal hygiene habits. This created relationship dynamics that are almost impossible for us to imagine. Romantic attraction couldn't be based on physical mystery or exclusive access to someone's body. Instead, partnerships formed around what the ancient Hellenes called harmonic resonance, the degree to which two people's catharotic practices complemented and enhanced each other. The bronze plaques describe Melania's eventual marriage to Theokritos, a young man who had specialized in developing oil formulations for unusual skin conditions. Their courtship involved months of collaborative experimentation with therapeutic treatments, working together to develop new techniques that could help other people with similar conditions. Their wedding ceremony took place in the bathhouse, with the entire community participating in an elaborate purification ritual that lasted for 3 days. The bronze plaques describe this as one of the most emotionally powerful events in the community's history, with participants reporting profound feelings of connection, joy, and spiritual transcendence. But the human dimension of ancient Hellenic hygiene also included profound challenges and conflicts that arose from such intimate community involvement in personal care. The bronze plaques document numerous disputes over catharotic techniques, accusations of inappropriate touching, and complex social hierarchies based on physical attractiveness and purification skills. One particularly revealing series of plaques describes a conflict between two master cathararchs, Apollodoros and Nicias, who developed competing theories about optimal oil temperature for treating childhood skin conditions. Their professional disagreement escalated into a community-wide controversy that lasted for months and involved detailed public debates about touching protocols, consent procedures, and the ethics of experimental treatments on children. The resolution came through what the ancient Hellenes called a purification trial, a formal process where both cathararchs demonstrated their techniques on volunteer subjects while the entire community observed and evaluated the results. The losing practitioner was required to publicly acknowledge the superiority of his rival's methods and undergo retraining under community supervision. These kinds of conflicts reveal that ancient Hellenic society wasn't a utopian paradise of perfect communal harmony. The intense intimacy and physical vulnerability required by their hygiene practices created complex social tensions, power dynamics, and emotional challenges that required sophisticated conflict resolution mechanisms. The bronze plaques also document the psychological effects of growing up in a culture where physical privacy was essentially non-existent. Many individuals struggled with what we might recognize as anxiety, depression, and identity issues related to constant community scrutiny of their bodies and personal care practices. Some people found ways to create small spaces of privacy within the communal system, developing personal rituals, forming exclusive partnerships with particular cathararchs, or even leaving their home communities to seek treatment in distant bathhouses where they could be anonymous. But for most people, like Melania, the benefits of constant community care and attention far outweighed the challenges. The bronze plaques consistently describe feelings of profound security, belonging, and emotional support that came from knowing that dozens of skilled, caring people were invested in your physical and psychological well-being. The human stories that emerge from the archaeological record paint a picture of a society that had solved some fundamental problems about loneliness, isolation, and care for vulnerable people, while creating new challenges around privacy, autonomy, and individual identity that they were still learning to navigate. Now I want you to imagine something that might feel uncomfortable, but bear with me because it's essential for understanding what we've lost and what we might be able to regain from ancient Hellenic hygiene practices. Picture yourself walking into your local gym or spa tomorrow morning, but instead of heading to private changing rooms and individual shower stalls, you're directed to a large communal space where 20 or 30 other people are already gathered, completely naked, engaged in an elaborate communal bathing ritual. Your first instinct would probably be panic. Where do you look? How do you hold your body? What do you do with your hands? The anxiety you'd feel isn't just about nudity, it's about the complete collapse of social boundaries that have been protecting you your entire life. You've been conditioned to believe that your body is fundamentally private, that showing vulnerability is dangerous, and that intimate physical care should only happen between you and a select few people you trust completely. But now imagine that instead of judgment, criticism, or sexual objectification, every person in that room looked at you with the same care and attention that you'd receive from a skilled massage therapist or physical trainer. Imagine that instead of feeling exposed and vulnerable, you felt held and supported by a community of people who are genuinely invested in your health and well-being. This is exactly what millions of ancient Hellenes experienced every single day for over 1,000 years. The emotional and psychological reality that seemed so impossible to us was completely normal and natural to them. They lived in a world where your daily shower was also your primary form of therapy, social connection, medical care, and spiritual practice all rolled into one experience. Think about how much time, money, and energy you spend trying to meet these needs separately in your modern life. You go to the gym for physical fitness, you see a therapist for emotional support, you visit a doctor for medical care, you attend religious services for spiritual connection, you make plans with friends for social interaction, you go to spas for relaxation and pampering. The ancient Hellenes met all of these needs simultaneously through their daily bathing practice. Every time they entered the bathhouse, they were receiving comprehensive care for their physical, emotional, social, spiritual, and medical needs, all at once, provided by a community of people who knew them intimately and were invested in their long-term well-being. Now think about the quality of care you typically receive in each of these modern contexts. Your gym trainer sees you for an hour a week and knows almost nothing about your personal life, emotional state, or medical history. Your therapist sees you for 50 minutes once a week and has limited understanding of your physical health or social relationships. Your doctor sees you for 15 minutes every few months and rarely discusses your emotional or spiritual well-being. Compare this fragmented, time-limited care to what Melania received in ancient Corinthia, hours of daily attention from skilled practitioners who knew every detail of her medical history, emotional needs, family relationships, and personal goals. The quality and comprehensiveness of care available through ancient Hellenic hygiene practices was arguably superior to what most of us can access today, even with all our modern medical and psychological sophistication. But here's what might be most difficult for you to imagine: the profound sense of security and belonging that came from knowing that your entire community was literally invested in keeping your body healthy and your spirit strong. In our culture, if you're struggling with health problems, relationship issues, or emotional challenges, you're essentially on your own to find and pay for appropriate help. In ancient Hellenic culture, if you were struggling with any aspect of your well-being, dozens of skilled, caring people would immediately mobilize to provide support, guidance, and hands-on assistance. You never had to wonder whether you could afford care, whether providers would be available when you needed them, or whether anyone would notice if you were suffering in silence. The psychological security of knowing that your basic needs for care, connection, and healing would always be met, that you were truly never alone in facing life's challenges, created a kind of emotional resilience and social confidence that's almost unimaginable to us. Think about the last time you were sick, injured, or going through a difficult emotional period. How much of your suffering came from the actual problem itself, and how much came from feeling isolated, unsupported, or uncertain about whether you'd be able to get the help you needed? Now imagine facing those same challenges while surrounded by a community of people who had been caring for your body and supporting your emotional well-being every day for your entire life. The problems wouldn't disappear, but your capacity to handle them would be dramatically different. This is what modern research on social support and health outcomes consistently confirms. People who have strong, reliable communities of care show better recovery rates from illness, lower rates of depression and anxiety, and greater overall life satisfaction compared to people who face challenges in isolation. But here's the part that might challenge you most deeply. Achieving these benefits required the ancient Hellenes to give up things that you probably consider essential to your identity and well-being. They had no privacy around their bodies. They had no control over who touched them or when. They couldn't hide their flaws, struggles, or vulnerabilities from their community. They couldn't opt out of social obligations when they didn't feel like participating. The question isn't whether you'd want to live exactly like the ancient Hellenes. Obviously, that's not possible or necessarily desirable in our modern context. The question is whether there are elements of their approach that you might be missing in your own life, and whether there are ways to incorporate some of their insights into your contemporary experience. What if you had even one relationship in your life where you felt as seen, cared for, and supported as Melania felt every day in the bathhouse? What if you had access to even a fraction of the comprehensive, integrated care that ancient Hellenic hygiene practices provided? What if you lived in a community where your physical and emotional well-being was considered a shared responsibility, rather than a private burden? These aren't just historical curiosities, they're possibilities that still exist in various forms around the world today, and they're options that you could explore in your own life if you chose to. Now let's dive into the specific mechanics of how ancient Hellenic hygiene actually worked on a day-to-day basis, because the devil, and the genius, is truly in the details. I'm going to walk you through 3 distinct aspects of their system that will completely reshape how you think about personal care, each one more surprising than the last. The morning preparation ritual. Every day began with what the ancient Hellenes called ephemeral preparation, a solo practice that prepared your body and mind for communal bathing later in the day. This wasn't anything like your quick morning shower routine. It was a deliberate, methodical process that could take up to an hour and involved techniques that modern science has proven to be remarkably effective. you would begin by applying what they called prophylactic oils, specialized blends that were designed not to clean your skin, but to protect it during the intensive scraping process that would happen later. These weren't simple olive oil mixtures. Archaeological analysis has revealed that different families and communities developed incredibly sophisticated oil formulations using dozens of plant extracts, mineral additives, and even fermented organic compounds. The most effective prophylactic oils contained natural antibiotics, anti-inflammatory compounds, and substances that would strengthen skin elasticity and promote rapid healing. Modern dermatologists who have studied these formulations describe them as being more scientifically advanced than many contemporary skincare products. But here's what will blow your mind. You didn't apply these oils with your hands. You used specialized applicators made from carved bone, polished stone, or specially treated wood that allowed for precise, even distribution across your entire body surface. The pressure, pattern, and timing of oil application were as carefully choreographed as a dance routine. Different applicators were used for different body regions, different seasons, and different individual skin types. Master cathararchs could diagnose medical conditions just by observing how someone applied their prophylactic oils in the morning. The technique revealed information about flexibility, coordination, emotional state, and underlying health issues that would inform treatment decisions later in the day. The final step of morning preparation involved what they called anticipatory meditation, a mental practice where you would visualize the communal bathing experience you were about to have, mentally preparing yourself to receive care from others and to provide care in return. This wasn't just relaxation or stress reduction, it was systematic psychological preparation for intimate social interaction that helped minimize anxiety and maximize the therapeutic benefits of communal bathing. The communal examination process. When you arrived at the bathhouse, you didn't immediately begin bathing. First, you participated in what the ancient Hellenes called catharotic assessment, a detailed examination process where experienced practitioners evaluated your current physical and emotional state to determine the optimal treatment approach for that day. This examination was incredibly thorough and sophisticated. Skilled cathararchs could assess your hydration levels by examining your skin texture, diagnose digestive issues by analyzing the scent of your prophylactic oils, and identify emotional stress patterns by observing how you held your body during the examination process. But here's what makes this truly remarkable. The examination wasn't performed by a single expert. It involved multiple practitioners working together, comparing observations, and reaching consensus about the best treatment approach. Imagine if every time you visited a doctor, you were simultaneously examined by 3 or 4 specialists who then collaborated to develop an integrated treatment plan specifically tailored to your current condition. The examination process also included what modern psychologists would recognize as advanced assessment techniques for mental and emotional health. Practitioners would ask detailed questions about your sleep patterns, dreams, social relationships, and recent life experiences while simultaneously performing physical assessments. They had developed sophisticated understanding of how physical and emotional health interconnected, and they could identify signs of depression, anxiety, or social stress through subtle changes in skin condition, muscle tension, and breathing patterns. The level of diagnostic sophistication was comparable to what we might expect from modern integrated medicine practitioners. The examination results were recorded on temporary clay tablets that were used to coordinate care throughout your bathing session. Different practitioners would consult these records to ensure that treatments were properly sequenced and that any contraindications or special needs were addressed appropriately. The advanced purification techniques. The actual bathing process involved techniques that were far more sophisticated than simple oil application and scraping. Master cathararchs had developed dozens of specialized procedures that combined physical treatment with psychological intervention in ways that modern spa treatments rarely achieve. One of the most advanced techniques was called harmonic scraping, a method where multiple practitioners would work on different parts of your body simultaneously, coordinating their scraping rhythms to create specific vibration patterns that promoted deep muscle relaxation and altered consciousness states. The bronze xystrons weren't just scraped across the skin randomly. Practitioners used specific geometric patterns, varying pressure sequences, and carefully timed intervals that had been developed through centuries of experimentation and refinement. Different patterns were used for different therapeutic goals. Some promoted circulation, others reduced inflammation, others facilitated emotional release. Modern massage therapists who have studied reconstructed versions of these techniques describe them as being more effective than most contemporary bodywork methods. The combination of oil preparation, precise tool work, and coordinated rhythm created therapeutic effects that single practitioner treatments simply cannot match. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect was the integration of psychological and spiritual elements into the physical treatment process. Practitioners would guide recipients through specific breathing patterns, visualization exercises, and even group singing or chanting that enhanced the physiological benefits of the treatment. They understood something that modern medicine is just beginning to rediscover, that physical healing is dramatically enhanced when it occurs in the context of emotional safety, social connection, and spiritual meaning. Every aspect of their purification techniques was designed to create this optimal healing environment. The session would conclude with what they called integration rituals, gentle, nurturing practices that helped your body and mind process the intensive treatment you had just received. These weren't just relaxation techniques. They were systematic methods for ensuring that the benefits of treatment would be maintained and enhanced over time. The sophistication of these techniques becomes even more impressive when you realize that they were developed without any modern understanding of anatomy, physiology, or psychology. The ancient Hellenes created these methods through careful observation, systematic experimentation, and generations of refinement, and they produced results that modern science is still trying to understand and replicate. After diving deep into the specifics of ancient Hellenic hygiene practices, we need to step back and synthesize what we've learned into a broader understanding of what this system really represents, and what it reveals about the choices our own civilization has made. The most profound realization is that the ancient Hellenes didn't just have different hygiene practices, they had a fundamentally different understanding of what it means to be human in relationship to other humans. Their approach to bodily care was based on the assumption that individual well-being is inseparable from community well-being, and that the health of the body is inseparable from the health of the mind, spirit, and social connections. This represents a complete inversion of our modern approach, which is based on the assumption that individual autonomy is the highest value, that privacy is essential for human dignity, and that physical health can be effectively addressed in isolation from emotional, social, and spiritual factors. Both systems work, but they optimize for completely different outcomes and create completely different types of human experience. Our modern hygiene system excels at preventing infectious disease, providing individual choice and autonomy, and maintaining personal privacy. The ancient Hellenic system excelled at creating social cohesion, providing comprehensive care for vulnerable individuals, and integrating physical health with psychological and spiritual well-being. The question isn't which system is objectively better, it's which trade-offs we want to make as individuals and as a society. Consider what we've gained through our modern approach. You can shower whenever you want, however you want, with whatever products you prefer. You don't have to worry about community judgment of your body or your hygiene choices. You're not dependent on others for basic cleanliness, and you're not obligated to provide intimate care for people you might not like or trust. You have privacy, autonomy, convenience, and freedom from social obligation around one of your most basic daily activities. These are genuine benefits that shouldn't be dismissed or minimized, but consider what we may have lost. You have no daily guarantee of caring human contact. You have no built-in community support system for health problems or life crises. You have no regular access to skilled practitioners who know your body intimately and can provide personalized care. You have no systematic integration of physical care with emotional and spiritual support. Most significantly, you have no protection against one of the most serious health crises of our time, the epidemic of loneliness and social isolation that researchers now recognize as being as dangerous to human health as smoking or obesity. The ancient Hellenic system couldn't prevent infectious diseases as effectively as ours can, but it provided powerful protection against the diseases of isolation, depression, anxiety, social alienation, and the numerous physical health problems that arise from chronic stress and lack of social support. What's particularly striking is how many of our current health challenges might be directly related to the trade-offs we've made in favor of privacy and individual autonomy. The rise in autoimmune disorders has been linked to excessive sterility and lack of microbiome diversity, exactly the problems that the ancient Hellenic approach to skincare would have prevented. The epidemic of anxiety and depression, particularly among young people, correlates strongly with decreased face-to-face social interaction and increased social media use, problems that would have been impossible in a culture where daily intimate community interaction was mandatory. The crisis in healthcare costs and accessibility might be partially addressed by approaches that emphasize prevention, community care, and integration of physical and emotional health, exactly the strengths of the ancient Hellenic system. But perhaps most importantly, we're beginning to recognize that many of our assumptions about privacy, autonomy, and individual choice may not be as beneficial as we thought they were. Research consistently shows that people who have strong community connections, regular physical touch, and integrated approaches to health and well-being are happier, healthier, and more resilient than people who prioritize independence and privacy. The ancient Hellenes may have been onto something profound about human nature that we've forgotten in our rush toward modernity. This doesn't mean we should or could return to their exact practices. The social, economic, and technological context that made their system possible no longer exists. We can't simply decide to bring back communal bathing and expect it to work in our current cultural framework, but we can learn from their insights and look for ways to incorporate some of their wisdom into our contemporary lives. We can seek out communities and practices that provide some of the benefits they achieved. Regular caring touch, integrated approaches to health, strong social support systems, and opportunities for appropriate vulnerability and mutual care. We can also question some of our assumptions about what we really need for well-being. Do we actually benefit from the extreme privacy we maintain around our bodies and health? Are we really better off handling all of our physical and emotional challenges in isolation? Have we thrown out valuable practices along with outdated social constraints? The most important insight from studying ancient Hellenic hygiene is that there are many different ways to organize human society around the basic needs for cleanliness, health, and care. The way we do things now isn't the only way, and it may not be the optimal way for all aspects of human flourishing. Their system reminds us that some of our most fundamental assumptions about human nature, privacy, and individual autonomy are actually cultural choices rather than universal truths. And like all cultural choices, they can be examined, questioned, and potentially modified if we find better approaches. The ancient Hellenes created a social technology for meeting human needs that was different from ours, but not necessarily inferior to ours. In some ways, it may have been superior, especially for aspects of human well-being that our current system handles poorly. Understanding their approach doesn't require us to adopt their practices, but it does require us to acknowledge that our current approach is one option among many, and that there might be wisdom in the alternatives we've abandoned. So here we are, back where we started, with you standing in your private shower, reaching for your familiar bottles and tools, but now everything has changed. You're no longer just washing your body. You're participating in a complex cultural system that prioritizes individual autonomy over community care, privacy over transparency, and convenience over comprehensive wellness. And now you know that this isn't the only way humans have approached one of our most basic daily activities. Every time you turn on that hot water and step into your solitary shower, you're making a choice. You're choosing efficiency over ritual, independence over interdependence, sterility over community microbiome sharing. You're choosing the protection of privacy over the benefits of vulnerable transparency. You're choosing the convenience of individual autonomy over the security of communal care. These aren't necessarily wrong choices, but they are choices. And understanding that they're choices rather than inevitable features of human nature opens up possibilities that didn't exist before. The question isn't whether you should abandon your private shower and start scraping olive oil off your skin with bronze tools in front of your neighbors. The question is whether there are elements of the ancient Hellenic approach that might enhance your life within your current context. What if you approached your daily shower as a ritual of self-care rather than a quick maintenance task? What if you used natural oils and gentle exfoliation techniques that honored your skin as a living interface with the world rather than treating it as a barrier to be sterilized? What if you found ways to incorporate caring touch and community connection into your wellness routines? These possibilities exist right now in your current life without requiring you to abandon the benefits of modern hygiene or violate your cultural values around privacy and autonomy. Consider the growing popularity of practices that echo ancient Hellenic wisdom. Communal hot springs and saunas, group fitness classes that emphasize mutual support, massage therapy and bodywork that integrate physical and emotional healing, mindfulness practices that connect individual well-being to community health. People are instinctively reaching for approaches that provide some of the benefits that the ancient Hellenes achieved through their hygiene practices: regular caring touch, community connection during vulnerable activities, integration of physical and emotional health, and opportunities for appropriate transparency and mutual support. The Korean spa culture that's spreading across American cities offers communal bathing experiences that echo some elements of ancient Hellenic practice. The growing interest in forest bathing, cold water therapy, and other nature-based wellness approaches reflects recognition that our sterile, isolated approach to health may be missing essential elements. Even the popularity of social media, despite its problems, represents a hunger for the kind of transparency and community connection that the ancient Hellenes achieved through their bronze plaque system and communal vulnerability practices. But perhaps the most important insight from our journey through ancient Hellenic hygiene is that individual well-being and community well-being are not competing values. They're complementary aspects of a single system. The ancient Hellenes understood that you can't have truly healthy individuals without healthy communities, and you can't have healthy communities without support systems that ensure individual needs are met. Our modern approach is optimized for individual choice and autonomy at the expense of community connection and mutual support. Their approach optimized for community connection and mutual support at the expense of individual choice and autonomy. But there's no reason we couldn't develop hybrid approaches that capture benefits from both systems. Imagine healthcare systems that combined the medical sophistication of modern medicine with the comprehensive community-based care approaches of ancient Hellenic practices. Imagine residential communities designed around shared wellness facilities where neighbours could choose to participate in supportive caring activities without sacrificing their individual privacy and autonomy. Imagine educational systems that taught children both individual self-care skills and community care skills, helping them develop the capacity for both independence and interdependence. Imagine workplace cultures that recognized employee well-being as a collective responsibility while still respecting individual boundaries and choices. These aren't utopian fantasies, they're practical possibilities that are already being explored in various forms around the world. The insights from ancient Hellenic hygiene practices provide a roadmap for how comprehensive, community-based approaches to wellness can work in practice. But the most immediate opportunity is personal. You can start experimenting with elements of their approach in your own life, within your own comfort zone, at your own pace. You can seek out communities and practices that provide some of the benefits they achieved. You can question your assumptions about what you really need for optimal well-being. You can begin to notice how much of your suffering comes from isolation, rather than from the actual problems you're facing. You can pay attention to how your body and mind respond to caring touch, community connection, and opportunities for appropriate vulnerability. You can start to imagine what your life might be like if you had access to even a fraction of the comprehensive, integrated care that was available to every citizen of ancient Corinthia, regardless of their social status or economic situation. The story of ancient Hellenic hygiene isn't just a fascinating historical curiosity. It's a mirror that reveals the assumptions and limitations of our current approach to human well-being. It's an invitation to consider possibilities that exist beyond the narrow range of options that our culture currently presents as normal and inevitable. And most importantly, it's a reminder that humans are capable of creating social systems that prioritize care, connection, and comprehensive well-being as effectively as we currently prioritize efficiency, autonomy, and individual choice. The question is, what kind of world do you want to help create? And what are you willing to experiment with in your own life to move in that direction? The bronze plaques of ancient Corinthia are still there, waiting in museums and archaeological storage facilities, containing wisdom about human flourishing that we're only beginning to understand and appreciate. Their insights are available to us whenever we're ready to learn from them. The only question is, are you ready? Epilogue: the discovery that changes everything. 6 months after I finished writing about the ancient Hellenic hygiene practices, I received a phone call that would change everything we thought we knew about this remarkable civilization. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a bioarchaeologist from the University of Barcelona, had been analysing tissue samples from naturally mummified remains found in a sealed chamber beneath the Corinthia bathhouse complex. What she discovered defied every assumption we had made about ancient health and longevity. The mummified remains belonged to 12 individuals who had lived during the height of the Catharotic period, around 400 BCE. But here's what shook the entire archaeological community. These people had lived to ages that shouldn't have been possible in the ancient world. Carbon dating and bone analysis revealed that several individuals had lived well into their 90s, with one woman reaching the extraordinary age of 104. But it wasn't just their longevity that was remarkable, it was their health. Bone density scans showed skeletal structures that were stronger and healthier than most modern 30-year-olds. Tissue analysis revealed virtually no signs of the chronic diseases that we consider inevitable parts of aging. Their teeth were perfect. Their skin, preserved by the unique mineral conditions in the sealed chamber, showed none of the damage we associate with advanced age. Most incredibly, brain tissue analysis suggested cognitive function that remained sharp and clear throughout their extended lifespans. Dr. Vasquez's team spent months trying to understand how this was possible. The breakthrough came when they analysed residue samples from the bronze xystrons found with the remains. The tools contained microscopic traces of over 40 different organic compounds, many of which modern science has only recently identified as having powerful anti-aging and health-promoting properties. The ancient Hellenes hadn't just been scraping oil and dirt from their skin, they had been applying sophisticated transdermal medications that delivered therapeutic compounds directly into their bloodstream through daily absorption. Their catharotic practices were essentially a form of advanced preventive medicine that we're only beginning to understand today. But the most stunning discovery was yet to come. Hidden beneath the sealed chamber, Dr. Vasquez's team found what appeared to be a library. Dozens of bronze tablets covered in detailed technical instructions for creating oil formulations, scraping techniques, and community care protocols. These weren't just hygiene instructions. They were comprehensive medical texts that described treatments for conditions we thought were unknown to ancient medicine. The tablets contained detailed protocols for managing diabetes, treating cancer, preventing cardiovascular disease, and even addressing what we would now recognize as genetic disorders. The level of medical sophistication was staggering. The ancient Hellenes had developed treatments that were, in some cases, more effective than modern approaches. They had understood the relationship between community connection and immune function, between touch therapy and neurological health, between emotional transparency and physical longevity. Most remarkably, they had documented how their hygiene practices needed to be adapted for different genetic types, seasonal variations, and individual health needs. They had essentially created personalized medicine based on daily observation and community care that was more comprehensive than anything we achieve today. The implications are revolutionary. We're not just looking at an alternative approach to hygiene, we're looking at an alternative approach to human health and longevity that produced measurably superior results to our current medical system. Dr. Vasquez's team is now working with biotechnology companies to recreate some of the ancient formulations using modern materials and safety standards. Early trials suggest that adapted versions of ancient Hellenic oil treatments could have significant benefits for treating chronic diseases, extending healthy lifespan, and improving overall quality of life. But perhaps more importantly, the discovery is forcing us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about ancient civilizations, human potential, and the relationship between social connection and physical health. The people of ancient Corinthia weren't just practicing unusual hygiene rituals, they were participating in a sophisticated medical system that enabled them to live longer, healthier lives than most humans have ever achieved. They had solved problems that we're still struggling with today, using nothing but careful observation, community care, and the systematic application of natural compounds through daily skin treatment. The bronze plaques we thought were just personal testimonials were actually medical records documenting the effectiveness of different treatments over time. The catharotic hierarchy we thought was just social organization was actually a sophisticated medical training system that produced practitioners with skills we're only beginning to rediscover. And the communal vulnerability that seemed so alien to us was actually a therapeutic technology that created the psychological and social conditions necessary for optimal health and longevity. As I write this, research teams around the world are racing to decode the remaining bronze tablets and understand the full scope of ancient Hellenic medical knowledge. We may be on the verge of rediscovering approaches to human health that could transform how we age, how we treat disease, and how we understand the relationship between individual well-being and community care. The shower you take tomorrow morning isn't just a quick rinse before starting your day. It's an opportunity to participate in discoveries that could change the future of human health and longevity. The ancient Hellenes are still teaching us, still showing us possibilities we never imagined, and we're only just beginning to understand what they knew. The final revelation, what we found in my own DNA. 3 weeks after Dr. Vasquez's discoveries made international headlines, I received a call that would make this story deeply personal in a way I never expected. Dr. Sarah Chen from Stanford, who had been following my research since the beginning, asked if I would be willing to participate in a genetic study she was conducting. She wanted to analyze the DNA of people who had successfully adapted to ancient Hellenic hygiene practices to see if there were genetic factors that predicted positive responses to traditional wellness approaches. I agreed, thinking it would contribute to the broader research effort. What I didn't expect was what the genetic analysis would reveal about my own family history. The results came back 6 weeks later, and Dr. Chen asked me to come to her lab in person to discuss them. When I arrived, she had an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of excitement, confusion, and something that looked almost like fear. "I need you to sit down," she said, pulling up a complex genetic analysis on her computer screen. "What I'm about to show you is going to sound impossible, but we've verified it through 3 independent labs. The genetic markers in my DNA told a story that shouldn't have been possible. Embedded in my genetic code were sequences that don't exist in modern human populations, sequences that perfectly matched genetic material extracted from the mummified remains found in Corinthia. I wasn't just studying ancient Hellenic hygiene practices, I was descended from the people who created them, but it gets stranger. The genetic analysis revealed that my unusual positive response to ancient hygiene practices wasn't just psychological or cultural adaptation. My body was literally designed to thrive on the specific oil formulations, scraping techniques, and community care approaches that I had been studying and practicing. Dr. Chen explained that my genetic makeup included adaptations for enhanced absorption of the specific plant compounds used in ancient catharotic oils, increased sensitivity to the therapeutic effects of bronze tool treatments, and even genetic variants that optimize my stress response and immune function, specifically in response to communal care activities. "It's as if your ancestors evolved specifically to benefit from these practices," she said, "and then passed those adaptations down through your bloodline for over 2,000 years. The implications were staggering. My family line had somehow maintained genetic adaptations to a lifestyle that had been extinct for millennia. But how was that possible? The answer came from Dr. Vasquez's team, who had been analysing migration patterns and genetic markers from archaeological sites across the Mediterranean. What they found rewrote our understanding of what happened when the Roman Empire absorbed ancient Hellenic territories. The catharotic practitioners hadn't simply disappeared when their bathhouse culture was suppressed by Roman hygiene practices. They had gone underground, literally. Hidden communities of cathararchs had maintained their practices in secret, passing down their knowledge and techniques through generations of hidden practitioners who lived seemingly normal Roman lives while secretly maintaining ancient Hellenic wellness traditions. These hidden communities had persisted through the fall of Rome, through the Byzantine period, through the Ottoman Empire, and even into the modern era. My genetic markers suggested that my family line had been part of this secret tradition for over 60 generations. But here's what made my head spin. I wasn't alone. Dr. Chen's expanded genetic study revealed that there are thousands of people living today who carry these ancient adaptations. Most of them don't know it, but their bodies are genetically optimized for wellness practices that have been hidden for 2,000 years. The people who are drawn to alternative medicine, traditional healing practices, communal wellness activities, and natural health approaches aren't just making lifestyle choices. Many of them are responding to genetic programming that their ancestors developed to thrive in community-based healing environments. Dr. Chen showed me a map of genetic distribution that was breathtaking in its scope. The ancient Hellenic genetic adaptations had spread throughout Europe, the Middle East and North Africa through secret networks of traditional healers who had maintained catharotic knowledge while adapting it to local conditions and cultural constraints. Your attraction to ancient hygiene practices wasn't academic curiosity, Dr. Chen explained. Your body was calling you home to practices that your genetic line had been maintaining in secret for millennia. The research team had identified over 300 genetic variants that enhance response to traditional wellness practices. People carrying these variants showed dramatically better outcomes when participating in community-based healing, natural medicine approaches and traditional bodywork techniques. Most remarkably, they had found evidence that these genetic adaptations were still evolving. People who regularly participated in community wellness activities were developing new genetic variants that enhanced social bonding, stress resilience, and immune function in ways that single-generation lifestyle changes couldn't explain. The ancient Hellenes hadn't just created a superior hygiene system, they had triggered evolutionary adaptations that were still influencing human health and behavior today. The growing interest in alternative medicine, traditional healing, and community wellness wasn't just cultural rebellion against modern medicine, it was genetic heritage asserting itself after centuries of suppression. But the most profound discovery was yet to come. Dr. Chen's team had found evidence that the genetic adaptations weren't just individual traits, they were designed to work in coordination with other people who carried similar variants. The ancient Hellenic approach to communal wellness had literally programmed genetic compatibility into their descendants. People with these genetic markers were naturally drawn to each other, formed stronger social bonds, and experienced enhanced therapeutic benefits when practicing traditional wellness approaches together. The community aspect of ancient catharotic practice wasn't just cultural preference, it was genetic necessity. You weren't just studying these practices, Dr. Chen told me, you were remembering them. Your genes were guiding you back to wellness approaches that your ancestors spent millennia perfecting. As I left her lab that day, everything about my life made sense in a way it never had before. My inexplicable fascination with ancient hygiene practices, my immediate positive response to traditional techniques, my deep sense of connection to communal wellness approaches, none of it had been coincidence. I had been following genetic programming that had been guiding my family line for over 2,000 years, calling us back to practices that could unlock health and longevity potential that modern medicine was only beginning to understand. And if Dr. Chen was right, there were thousands of others like me, carrying genetic heritage from one of the most sophisticated wellness traditions in human history, waiting to rediscover practices that could transform their health and their lives. The ancient Hellenids hadn't just given us knowledge about hygiene, they had given us genetic gifts that are still waiting to be unwrapped. The convergence, when ancient secrets meet modern crisis. What happened next transformed this from an academic discovery into a global phenomenon that would change the course of human health forever. 2 months after my genetic revelation, the world was hit by something no one saw coming, a new autoimmune pandemic that made COVID-19 look manageable. Called cascade immune syndrome, or CIS, it caused people's immune systems to attack their own healthy tissue in an escalating spiral that conventional medicine couldn't stop. Within 6 weeks, over 50 million people worldwide were affected. Hospitals were overwhelmed not with infectious disease, but with bodies that were literally destroying themselves from the inside. The medical establishment was helpless. Every treatment they tried only seemed to accelerate the autoimmune cascade. But then something extraordinary happened. Dr. Chen noticed that people carrying the ancient Hellenic genetic markers weren't getting sick. Not just resistant to CIS, they were completely immune. Even more remarkably, the few who'd been practicing reconstructed catharotic techniques were showing enhanced immune function that seemed to be protecting not just themselves, but people in close physical contact with them. The discovery triggered the largest emergency research mobilization in human history. Within days, geneticists, immunologists, and bioarchaeologists from every major research institution were working around the clock to understand why ancient hygiene practices were providing protection against a modern autoimmune disaster. What they found changed everything we thought we knew about human immunity and disease resistance. The ancient Hellenic oil formulations weren't just delivering therapeutic compounds through the skin, they were programming the microbiome to produce protective factors that modern medicine had never identified. The community-based scraping techniques weren't just removing dead skin, they were facilitating microbiome transfer between individuals that created collective immune protection. The bronze tools weren't just cleaning implements, they were precision instruments that stimulated specific acupressure points and neural pathways that regulated immune function in ways Western medicine had never discovered. Most incredibly, the psychological and social aspects of catharotic practice, the vulnerability, community connection, and emotional transparency were triggering epigenetic changes that activated dormant immune protection genes that had been suppressed by modern lifestyle factors. The ancient Hellenes had accidentally created a comprehensive immune enhancement system that protected against exactly the kind of autoimmune cascade that was now devastating the modern world. As CIS continued to spread, governments began implementing emergency protocols based on ancient Hellenic practices. Emergency catharotic centres were established in major cities, staffed by teams trained in reconstructed ancient techniques. People were organised into community care groups that practiced modified versions of communal bathing and oil treatment. The results were immediate and dramatic. Communities that implemented catharotic protocols showed 95% resistance to CIS infection, and even people who were already sick began showing recovery rates that defied medical explanation. But the most profound changes weren't medical, they were social. Within months, the emergency catharotic centres had evolved into permanent community wellness facilities that provided not just disease protection, but comprehensive support for physical, emotional, and social health. People who had been isolated and disconnected for years were forming deep, caring relationships through shared vulnerability and mutual care practices. Mental health statistics showed unprecedented improvements. Rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide plummeted in communities that had implemented catharotic protocols. Social cohesion and civic engagement reached levels not seen since before the digital age. Children who grew up participating in adapted catharotic practices showed enhanced emotional intelligence, stronger immune systems, and remarkable resilience to stress and trauma. Educational outcomes improved dramatically as schools integrated community care practices into their curricula. The economic implications were staggering. Healthcare costs dropped by over 60% in regions with established catharotic centres. Workplace productivity increased as employees experienced less stress, better health, and stronger team cohesion. Crime rates fell as communities developed stronger social bonds and support systems. But perhaps most remarkably, the genetic research revealed that participating in catharotic practices was triggering rapid evolutionary changes. People who regularly engaged in community-based wellness were developing new genetic variants in real time, adaptations that enhanced social bonding, immune function, and stress resilience that were being passed to their children within a single generation. Humanity was evolving, rapidly and intentionally, toward enhanced capacity for community care and collective well-being. 5 years after the CIS pandemic began, the world had been transformed. The crisis that had threatened to destroy human civilization had instead catalyzed a return to ancient wisdom that was creating healthier, more connected, more resilient communities than had existed for thousands of years. The catharotic centres had become the heart of a new social organisation based on mutual care, shared vulnerability, and collective responsibility for individual and community well-being. People who had grown up thinking that isolation and independence were signs of strength were discovering that interdependence and transparency were actually the keys to optimal human flourishing. Dr. Chen's research showed that the genetic markers that had once identified descendants of ancient cathararchs were now appearing in people with no previous genetic connection to ancient Hellenic populations. The practices themselves were triggering the evolutionary adaptations that enhanced their effectiveness. We're not just rediscovering ancient wisdom, Dr. Chen explained in her landmark paper that would reshape our understanding of human evolution. We're actively evolving toward our optimal social and biological configuration. The ancient Hellenes didn't just give us practices, they gave us a roadmap for becoming the species we were meant to be. As I write this, catharotic centres are operating in every major city on Earth. Children are growing up with daily community care as a normal part of life. Genetic analysis shows that within 2 generations, the enhanced immune protection and social bonding genes will be present in over 80% of the human population. The autoimmune pandemic that threatened to destroy us instead saved us by forcing us to rediscover practices that unlocked human potential we never knew we had. And it all started with curiosity about why ancient people scraped olive oil off their skin with bronze tools. Sometimes the most important discoveries come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the future of human civilization is hidden in practices we dismissed as primitive and irrelevant. Sometimes the answer to our most urgent modern problems is waiting in the wisdom of people who lived thousands of years ago, who understood things about human nature that we're only now beginning to rediscover. The ancient Hellenes are still teaching us, and we're finally ready to learn. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.